The world sometimes spins on an axis of near misses and a breath held too long. For Sarah, it begins not with a whisper, but with the jarring symphony of a city artery choking on its own speed, the screech of tires, the angry blare of horns, a collective gasp held in the sun-baked air of a Tuesday afternoon. This is the moment that ignites the extraordinary, sparked by a decision made in a fraction of a second. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe quiet genius always finds a way, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Sarah lived a life painted in muted colors, a tapestry of routine and quiet resilience. She was a woman accustomed to the periphery, not by choice, but by the subtle, persistent way the world had of looking past her. Her days were measured in the rhythmic hum of the city bus she rode to her cleaning job at a downtown office building, the polite, almost invisible nods she exchanged with preoccupied faces in the solitude of her small apartment, a sanctuary filled more with the scent of Earl Grey tea and old books than with laughter or loud conversations. She carried a gentle strength, an observant nature that saw much and said little, a capacity for empathy that ran deeper than most knew, hidden beneath a surface of unassuming calm. This existence, often lonely, had nonetheless carved in her a profound understanding of vulnerability, until a single moment on a frantic highway threatened to flip everything she thought she knew about her place in it. But what happened next would change everything. Sarah's past was a quiet ledger of shouldered burdens and small, uncelebrated victories. She'd learned early that life didn't often hand out favors, at least not to people like her, people who moved through the world without fanfare. Her mother, a woman whose hands were never still and whose heart was twice the size of her small frame, had taught her the value of kindness, not as a transaction, but as a fundamental human duty. "You give what you can, Sarah girl," she'd often said, her voice a warm memory, not because you expect something back, but because it's the right thing to do. Those words had become a quiet compass. After losing her mother too young, Sarah had navigated the complexities of adulthood with a stoicism that sometimes masked a yearning for connection. She found solace in simple things: the first bloom of spring in the neglected park near her building, the intricate patterns of frost on her windowpane in winter, the comforting weight of a borrowed library book. Her skills were practical, born of necessity. She could mend almost anything, stretch a dollar further than seemed possible, and soothe a crying child with a quiet hum. Her emotional state was a carefully managed equilibrium, a practiced calm that had weathered its share of storms. She didn't expect much from the world, but she held herself to a high standard of decency. Her small apartment, neat and sparsely furnished, was on the third floor of a brick building that had seen better decades. It overlooked a busy street, but her windows faced the quieter back alley, offering glimpses of scraggly city trees and the comings and goings of neighborhood cats. This was her world, one where she was largely self-reliant. Her only regular interactions beyond work were with Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman in 2B who sometimes needed help with her groceries, and Mr. Henderson, the quiet superintendent who always offered a gruff but not unkind nod. There was no close ally in the traditional sense, no confidant to share her deepest thoughts with, a void that made her acts of compassion all the more profound, springing from an inner wellspring rather than shared encouragement. The city itself, with its relentless pace and anonymous crowds, often felt like the primary opposing force in her life. It was a place of stark contrasts, gleaming towers beside forgotten alleyways, overt wealth next to quiet struggles. And then there was the highway, a concrete river that sliced through the urban landscape, a place of constant motion and inherent danger. She remembered a news story from a few months prior, a grim report about a multi-car pileup on that very stretch, the images of twisted metal and flashing lights a stark reminder of its unforgiving nature. It was a place most people hurried through, heads down, focused only on their destination, a place where vulnerability was an invitation for disaster. This background hum of potential peril, of societal indifference, was the subtle antagonist against which her quiet strength would soon be pitted. Sarah believed in the good of people, but she'd also seen how easily individuals could be swallowed by the uncaring machinery of modern life, how quickly compassion could be sidelined by urgency. This understanding, never cynical but always present, informed her worldview, suggesting that her capacity for extraordinary kindness was a rare commodity, one the world seldom paused to acknowledge. The first sound was the panicked yelp, a thin, desperate cry nearly swallowed by the roar of traffic. Sarah, walking home from a bus stop slightly further than her usual one due to a detour, had been idly watching the relentless flow of vehicles on the interstate overpass when her eyes snagged on a small, dark shape darting erratically near the median. Horns blared. A large truck swerved violently, its air brakes hissing in protest. Her heart leaped into her throat. It was a dog, small and terrified, its leg bent at an unnatural angle as it limped, trapped between lanes of hurtling steel. Time seemed to slow, stretch. Other pedestrians had stopped, some pointing, others shaking their heads, a collective murmur of helplessness rising from the sidewalk. But Sarah saw only the animal, its wide, frightened eyes, the heaving of its small chest. In that instant, the cacophony of the highway faded, replaced by a singular, urgent focus. The memory of her mother's words, "You give what you can," echoed not as a gentle reminder, but as an undeniable command. There was no conscious weighing of risks, no debate with fear. Her body moved before her mind could fully articulate the decision. She scanned the traffic, a desperate calculation of speed and distance. A momentary lull, a gap too small for any sane person to consider. She kicked off her sensible walking shoes for better purchase, her worn jacket clutched in her hand. Then she ran. The asphalt was hot beneath her socks. The wind whipped past her, carrying the stench of exhaust and burning rubber. Horns screamed, closer now, a chorus of outrage and alarm. A red sedan skidded, its driver's face a mask of shock. She didn't look. Her gaze was fixed on the whimpering creature. Reaching the median felt like breaking through a physical barrier. The dog, a small terrier mixed with matted fur, cowered, trying to make itself invisible. "It's okay," she murmured, her voice surprisingly steady, projecting a calm she didn't entirely feel. "I'm here to help you." She knelt, extending a hand slowly. The dog flinched, then, as if sensing the sincerity in her stillness, let out a soft whine. Gently, carefully, she wrapped it in her jacket, cocooning its trembling body. The fabric was thin, offering little protection, but it was something. Turning back was even more perilous. Traffic had snarled, drivers craning their necks, the temporary pause she'd exploited gone. She was an island in a river of chaos. Holding the dog close, she pressed herself against the concrete barrier, making herself as small as possible, shielding the animal with her own body. A state trooper, lights flashing, was the first to arrive, his voice amplified by a bullhorn, initially sharp with reprimand, then softening as he took in the scene. The woman, her face smudged with dirt, her expression resolute, and the small, injured animal cradled in her arms. He and another officer managed to stop the traffic, their presence creating a temporary shield. Sarah felt a wave of relief so profound her knees nearly buckled. She was bruised from a near stumble, her palms scraped, but her grip on the dog never loosened. As they helped her to the safety of the cruiser, someone in the small crowd that had gathered on the overpass began to clap, a hesitant, scattered applause that quickly grew. Sarah barely registered it, her attention solely on the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the dog against her chest. She refused to leave its side until it was clear it would receive care. Back in the quiet solitude of her apartment, the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a collection of fresh scrapes and bruises. The dog, whom she'd instinctively started calling Lucky, lay on a makeshift bed of old towels beside her own, whimpering softly in its sleep. She had managed to get some water and a little softened bread into him after a visit to an emergency vet clinic that had stretched her meager savings to their limit. The diagnosis was a fractured tibia and severe dehydration, but the vet, a kind woman named Dr. Evans with tired eyes, had assured her Lucky would recover with rest and care. Word of the rescue, fueled by a few blurry cell phone videos and eyewitness accounts, began to circulate through her neighborhood and then, improbably, onto local news social media pages. Her landlady, Mrs. Henderson's usually stern wife, stopped her in the hallway with a rare, approving smile. "That was a brave thing you did, Sarah. A very brave thing." Sarah merely nodded, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. Anyone would have done the same, she demurred, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. She truly believed it, or at least, she believed any decent person should have. The following days settled into a new routine. Sarah adjusted her work hours slightly, rushing home to tend to Lucky. She meticulously cleaned his wound, administered his medication, and coaxed him to eat small meals. She carried him gently outside for bathroom breaks, his small, bandaged leg held carefully. The expense of the vet visit and the ongoing need for medication weighed on her mind. She started looking for extra cleaning shifts, calculating and recalculating her budget, the familiar tightness of financial worry a dull ache in her chest. Yet, watching Lucky slowly regain strength, the trust growing in his soft brown eyes as he'd lick her hand, brought a quiet joy that outweighed the anxiety. He was a warm presence in her usually silent apartment, his soft snores a comforting sound in the night. She put up found dog flyers in local stores and community centers, her neat handwriting describing Lucky and her contact information. She checked online lost and found pet sites daily. A part of her hoped his family would be found for his sake. Another, smaller part, a part she tried to ignore, dreaded the thought of him leaving. One afternoon, a week after the rescue, she overheard two women at the bus stop. "Did you see that video?" The woman on the highway, one said. "Crazy, if you ask me. Could have gotten herself killed for a dog." The other nodded. Some people have too much time on their hands. Sarah felt a familiar pang, not of anger, but of a quiet resignation. It was the casual dismissal, the inability to comprehend an act driven purely by compassion, that stung. It was the echo of a world that often valued pragmatic self-interest over selfless empathy. She pulled her worn cardigan tighter, turning away, the words a stark reminder of how easily her actions could be misinterpreted or trivialized. The small flurry of local interest seemed to be dying down, the city moving on to its next brief sensation. She continued her care for Lucky, the bond between them deepening with each passing day, his healing a quiet testament to her unwavering dedication. She assumed life would return to its previous rhythm, albeit with a small, fur-legged companion. Then, one evening, after a long shift, she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Lucky's excited, slightly hobbled greeting the highlight of her day. Tucked into the jamb of her door was a plain white envelope. There was no stamp, no return address, just her apartment number neatly printed on the front. Her brow furrowed. She didn't usually receive unexpected mail, especially not hand-delivered. Mrs. Rodriguez sometimes left her a slice of cake, but always with a little note. Inside her apartment, with Lucky nosing curiously at her ankles, she carefully opened it. There was no letter, no card, no explanation. Just a single car key resting on a small piece of folded black velvet. It was a modern key, with an integrated fob, sleek and unfamiliar. Sarah stared at it, her mind a blank. A car key? It had to be a mistake. Someone had put it in the wrong door. But her apartment number was clearly printed. She picked it up. It felt cool and heavy in her palm. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Confusion warbled with a nascent, unbelievable flicker of something else. Hope? Preposterous. She walked to her window, looking down into the alley, then to the street out front. Nothing seemed out of place. No new, unfamiliar car parked expectantly. The key lay on her small kitchen table, a silent, gleaming enigma. She thought the ripples of that day on the highway had finally settled, but the weight of this small metal object in her hand suggested a new, powerful wave was about to break over her quiet life. The key became an object of intense speculation in Sarah's mind. For 2 days, it sat on her kitchen table, a constant, silent question mark. She'd pick it up, turn it over in her fingers, her thumb tracing the outline of the manufacturer's logo, a brand she recognized as reliable, sensible, but far beyond her own means. Was it a prank? A cruel joke? But who would play such a specific, elaborate trick on her, a woman who largely kept to herself? Her logical mind searched for explanations. Perhaps it belonged to a previous tenant, and someone had finally found it and tried to return it, mistakenly thinking she was that person. Yet, the envelope had been fresh, the printing clear. It felt intentional. The alternative, the one her practical nature shied away from, was that it was meant for her. But why? And from whom? The highway rescue was the only recent event that had drawn any attention to her, however fleeting. Could this be connected? It seemed too fantastical, like something from a movie, not from her own carefully ordered, often predictable life. She considered asking Mr. Henderson, the superintendent, if he knew anything, but an instinct held her back. This felt intensely personal, almost intimate in its anonymity. The thought of discussing it, of inviting scrutiny or skepticism, made her uneasy. The crazy lady comment from the bus stop echoed in her mind. What if this was an extension of that, some bizarre, misguided attempt to mock her further? But the key itself felt solid, real, not like a joke. The little piece of velvet it rested on suggested care, even respect. On the third morning, her curiosity, mixed with a growing sense of unease at the unresolved mystery, finally outweighed her apprehension. She couldn't simply ignore it. She had to know. Her first step was to walk around her immediate neighborhood, her gaze sweeping over parked cars, the key clutched in her pocket. She felt a bit foolish, like a detective in a low-budget film. What was she even looking for? A car that looked new? A car that looked like it needed a key? After an hour of fruitless searching, a new thought struck her. The key had a fob with a panic button. Back in her apartment, she stood by her front window, the one overlooking the street. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the small red button. For a moment, nothing. Then, from down the block, a distinct chirp, followed by the flash of hazard lights from a modest, dark blue sedan parked about halfway down the street. Her breath hitched. The car hadn't been there the day before. She was sure of it. It was clean, unassuming, but clearly well-maintained. Not new, but new, M. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The key, the car. It was real. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She leaned against the wall, Lucky whining softly at her feet, sensing her distress. She had to go down there. She had to see. The risk felt enormous, not of physical danger, but of emotional exposure. What would she find? Who could possibly do something like this? The walk from her apartment door to that car felt like the longest journey of her life, each step charged with a mixture of dread and an almost unbearable anticipation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows as Sarah approached the dark blue sedan. It was parked legally, blending in with the other vehicles lining the residential street, yet it seemed to pulse with a quiet significance only she could perceive. Her hand, holding the key, trembled slightly. Lucky, whom she'd brought with her on his leash, sat patiently by her side, his tail giving a tentative thump against the pavement. She took another steadying breath, the metallic scent of the city air sharp in her nostrils. She reached the driver's side door. The car was a few years old, a practical model, but in immaculate condition. For a moment, she just stood there, tracing the outline of the door handle with her eyes. This couldn't be happening. Generosity on this scale was something she read about, something that happened to other people. Hesitantly, she raised the key. It slid into the lock smoothly. A soft click. She pulled the handle, and the door swung open with an expensive, well-engineered sigh. The interior was spotless, smelling faintly of new car scent, and something else, a subtle, clean fragrance she couldn't quite place. It was fabric upholstery, gray and understated. On the passenger seat lay another plain white envelope, identical to the one that had held the key. This time, her name, Sarah M., was printed on it. Her fingers fumbled slightly as she tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of crisp, good-quality paper, folded neatly. The message was typewritten, brief, and to the point. Miss Sarah M., what you did on the highway, it was more than brave. It was a profound act of selflessness. My mother was in one of those cars that stopped. She saw everything. She has been unwell, and her faith in humanity has been tested lately. Witnessing your courage, your absolute refusal to abandon that helpless animal in the face of such danger, it moved her deeply. It moved me deeply. This vehicle is a small token of gratitude. It is fully paid for, registered, and insured for the first year. The paperwork is in the glove compartment. We wish to remain anonymous, not out of secrecy, but because this is about your act, not about us. Sometimes, compassion is its own reward. Sometimes, it inspires others to reflect that compassion back into the world. May this help you, as you helped another. Sincerely, a grateful witness. Sarah sank into the driver's seat, the paper trembling in her hands. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the typewritten words. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. It was real. A wave of emotion so powerful it stole her breath washed over her. Disbelief, gratitude, a profound, aching tenderness. Someone had seen her. Not just her action, but her. They had understood the heart behind it, the quiet strength she thought was invisible to the world. She reread the note, her gaze lingering on the phrase, her faith in humanity has been tested. Sarah understood that. She understood how easily cynicism could take root. And yet, her simple, instinctive act had apparently pushed back against that tide for someone. She looked around the car, at the clean dashboard, the neatly arranged controls. It was more than a car. It was a lifeline. It was a symbol of recognition, an affirmation of the values her mother had instilled in her. The sacrifices she'd made for Lucky, the worry over vet bills, the quiet anxieties of her daily life. Suddenly, a significant burden felt lifted. not just a financial burden, but an emotional one too. The feeling of being overlooked, of her quiet efforts going unnoticed, dissipated in the face of this staggering, anonymous kindness. Lucky, who had patiently waited, now nudged his head under her hand. She stroked his soft fur, tears streaming freely down her face now, not tears of sorrow, but of overwhelming, cathartic release. She wasn't a crazy lady. She was Sarah, and her compassion had, indeed, spoken louder than any words. The benefactor had not just given her a car, they had given her back a piece of her own faith in the unexpected goodness of the world. She placed the key in the ignition. The engine started with a smooth, quiet hum, a sound that promised new beginnings. A profound sense of peace settled over Sarah, a stillness that seeped into the very marrow of her bones. She sat there for a long moment, the engine humming softly, her hands resting on the steering wheel, the anonymous benefactor's note clutched in her lap. Lucky, sensing the shift in her, leaned his head against her thigh, his warm breath a comforting presence. She breathed deeply, the scent of the clean car interior mingling with the city air drifting through the open door. Relief, pure and unadulterated, washed through her. The local news did pick up on the story again, a small human interest follow-up about the anonymous gift, framing it as a Christmas in July sort of tale for the highway hero. The article mentioned that the anonymous donors had also made a quiet contribution to the local animal shelter in Sarah's name, a small ripple of the initial act expanding outwards. It wasn't a systemic change in the grand scheme of things, but it was a tangible thread of good, woven into the fabric of the community. Sarah found the paperwork in the glove compartment, just as the note had said, title, registration, insurance details, all neatly organized. The car was hers, unequivocally. The agency it offered was immense. No more long waits at bus stops in the rain, no more rushing to make the last connection home. Vet appointments for Lucky would be easier. The possibility of visiting the coast, something she hadn't done since she was a child, flickered in her mind, a small, hopeful spark. The future, she knew, was still hers to navigate, with its own set of challenges and uncertainties, but the path felt a little wider now, a little less encumbered. This gift wasn't a magical solution to all life's problems, but it was a powerful affirmation, a reminder that kindness, even when quiet and uncelebrated, could resonate in ways one might never expect. She drove home slowly, carefully, Lucky secured in a borrowed carrier on the passenger seat, his soft snores filling the comfortable silence. As she parked in her usual area, now with a designated spot that Mr. Henderson had surprisingly arranged after hearing the news, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. There was a new light in her eyes, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Her bond with Lucky, forged in a moment of shared peril and strengthened through care, was now irrevocably intertwined with this unexpected chapter. They were a family, an unconventional one, perhaps, but a family nonetheless. She reached over and gently stroked Lucky's head. He blinked his eyes open, looked at her, and let out a contented sigh. Sarah smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. The world still turned, traffic still roared on the distant highway, but for Sarah, something fundamental had shifted. Compassion had been answered with compassion. And in the quiet dignity of that moment, she knew she was truly seen. This is where we leave Sarah, on the cusp of a new journey, her quiet strength finally acknowledged, her world a little brighter. Compassion, it turns out, has a voice that echoes. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.